The crowning lesson is here, the traffic pattern. Today is where we learn how to tie it all together: takeoff, maneuvering, landings, and checklists. Once you've mastered this, you'll be able to perform your solo touch and goes, and you'll have earned your wings. Let's do this.
Welcome to Navigraph Academy, where we apply real-life flying techniques to enable you to fly accurately and proficiently in our most sophisticated modern home flight simulators. Today is the last lesson in the 0 to solo phase of our virtual private pilot's license course, and you are about to become ready for your solo flight. In our previous lesson, we were focused solely on takeoff and landing techniques, and today we're adding the traffic pattern to the challenge. We will learn how to accurately follow the standard layout, performing checklists and maneuvering as we do. This lesson is divided into 3 parts, where we will first discuss the traffic pattern layout and the terminology, and then we will look at the climb, crosswind and the downwind segments of the pattern, including discussing how to perform our before landing checklist. And lastly, we'll focus on the final part of the traffic pattern, which is the late downwind, the base turn and the final segment. Here we will also discuss the touch and go technique. All of this will allow you to go into the flight simulator and practice several takeoff and landings back to back. And the goal for today is simple: to fully prepare you for your solo flight. In the next and final part of the 0 to solo phase, we will test your skills by letting you off on your solo, where your proficiency will be evaluated. The solo flight includes 2 touch and go landings, followed by a full stop, which all has to be done accurately and correctly in order to pass your phase check. And at that point, you will have earned your wings. So are you ready for this? Let's go. The traffic pattern is a standardized path around the airport, and the goal of the traffic pattern is to maneuver the aircraft safely onto the final approach segment. That is a segment which we covered on our last session. But to reach this point, the aircraft will follow a series of legs around the airport, usually forming a rectangular path consisting of left turns, as left-hand patterns are the standard. However, some airports may also use a right-hand traffic pattern when so required. Let us now consider an aircraft practicing repeated takeoff and landings, which is called touch and goes, just like you will be doing soon. First, we should note that planes always take off and land into the wind. Landing into the wind allows more air to flow over the wings at a lower ground speed, resulting in a shorter takeoff and landing roll. And today we are going to use runway 10 at St. Gallen Altenrhein Airport, located in northern Switzerland. And runway 10 indicates that the runway direction is almost due east. Since the wind is coming from the east, runway 10 will be perfect for takeoff and landings today. Let us zoom out and consider the layout of the traffic pattern around runway 10. After takeoff, the aircraft will be located on the departure leg. This leg is sometimes referred to as the climb out leg or the upwind leg, so called since it is flown up and into the wind. On this leg, we're usually still climbing towards our pattern altitude. As the aircraft turns, it will now be located on the crosswind leg, so called since the wind is now blowing across our flight path. And on this leg, we're usually leveling off at the pattern altitude. After flying a sufficiently long distance to establish a proper distance to the airport, we will turn left once again, heading parallel to the runway. And we are now on the leg called the downwind, or the downwind leg, so called since we're flying down with the wind. In this case, on a course heading due west. On the downwind, our goal is to maintain altitude and perform our before landing flow. And this flow consists of actioning the before landing checklist from memory. In the latter part of the downwind, we will be abeam the touchdown point. And at this position, we will start configuring the aircraft for landing, including extending flaps and reducing the airspeed. We will continue on the downwind until we are at a roughly 45-degree angle off the runway, like this. At this point, it is time to turn once again. The next leg is called the base leg. In the turn to the base, we initiate our descent, and once on the base, we select further flaps. The base leg is often a quite short leg, where the main goal is to reduce airspeed and start reducing altitude. Next is our final turn, and we will now find ourselves on the final leg. Here we select full landing flap and establish our approach speed at 70 knots. The goal from here on is to follow the 3-degree glide path with a maintained speed. As we come closer and approach the runway, we further reduce the airspeed to a threshold speed of 61 knots. And you will be familiar with this segment from our previous lesson that covered landings. From here, we proceed to land. In summary, the traffic pattern consists of the departure, the crosswind, the downwind, the base, and the final leg. Here are some final notes on the layout of the traffic pattern. We have 2 additional terms that are sometimes used as well. Position overhead indicates a position right above the airfield. Additionally, if a path is flown on the opposite side of the runway, but in the same direction as the takeoff direction, this leg is also sometimes referred to as the upwind leg. You may recall that the departure leg could also be called the upwind leg, and both of these are correct, as any leg flown in the same direction as the landing traffic is called the upwind. Now that we know the general layout of the pattern, let us shift our focus to the procedures, the power settings, and the airspeeds that correspond to each of these legs. We'll start from the beginning with the climb out leg. Here we are established in a steady climb at 75 knots. And as we have practiced in the previous lessons, at 300 feet we will make sure our flaps are up. Note that St. Gallen Airport is located at 1,300 feet above sea level, so this means we check our flaps at 1,600 feet indicated altitude. At 500 feet above the ground, we will perform our climb flow. Having reached a minimum of 700 feet, and having made sure we have passed the opposite end of the runway, we can begin our turn to crosswind. We check our left and initiate a climbing turn to the left. Reaching the perpendicular course, we once again go wings level, and we are now on the crosswind leg. At this point, we usually reach the pattern altitude, and a good height above the ground for the Cessna is about 1,000 feet. Reaching this altitude, we level off and transition to a level flight attitude. Checking the runway, we can estimate if we have reached a proper parallel distance to the runway. If we have, we find a landmark to our left and we turn downwind. We stop the turn at the landmark. We can cross-check that our course is parallel to the runway by checking the heading indicator. Once we've checked the heading, we switch over to using our landmark as the primary reference point to maintain the parallel track. Once on the downwind, we look left at the runway and consider how wide our parallel distance is. It is important that we do not make the parallel distance too narrow, as this may give us a very short base later on, which would make it a lot more difficult to reduce enough altitude before hitting the final leg. On the other hand, too wide of a downwind would cause the pattern to be too big, and it would take a long time to fly the whole pattern profile. This could impede the other traffic at the airport, as well as reducing our own time spent practicing takeoff and landings. At St. Gallen Altenrhein Airport, flying just outside these 2 juts would put you at a good zero-wind parallel distance to the runway. As a side note, this is also the published downwind location at St. Gallen, as is evident on the visual flying rules map of the area, shown here in Navigraph charts. As you can see, the published traffic pattern lies just outside the 2 island juts, just where we expected it to be. Pretty cool, huh? We will look into how to use Navigraph charts to assist our flight planning in your next lessons. For now, let's return to the traffic pattern training. Once we are stable on our downwind course, fully trimmed for level flight, it is a good idea to perform the before landing flow. This consists of the following items. Fuel selector, both. And this is in the 12 o'clock position. Having this in both prevents one tank from running dry at an inopportune time. The next item, mixture rich. This gives the engine the best cooling and the best performance at a low altitude. Landing and taxi lights on. This makes us more visible to other traffic. Autopilot off. This ensures we are in full control of the aircraft. We continue flying towards our landmark, heading for the abeam point. And at that position, the approach will begin. But before we delve deeper into the approach, let's hear Jason explain how we expertly fly the climb out, the crosswind, and the downwind segments.
Here we are on the runway and have just begun our takeoff roll. I reach 55 knots and then I rotate. Let's accelerate to climb speed. We'll raise our nose to climb attitude. We are now on the climb out leg. Like we discussed last time, it's important to maintain 75 knots and to track the extended center line. Thus, I check behind me to ensure that I'm still following the runway's direction. This looks good. At 300 feet, we're going to check that our flaps are up. We continue the climb towards 500 feet. At 500 feet above the ground, I perform our climb flow. As we learned last time, this consists of checking the power to full, checking the mixture to rich, and checking that the engine instruments are in the green. I see we're above 700 feet over the ground, so it's time to turn crosswind. I check left for any traffic and pick out a good landmark to turn toward. I began the turn. Remember, in a climb, we should only bank 20 degrees. I'm now looking for our landmark. There it is. Let's go wings level. We are approaching 1,000 feet above the ground, our pattern altitude here. Let's level off. Things move fast from this point on. Let's trim. Then we're going to check left to see if we're coming up on a good parallel distance. We are. It's time to turn again. Let's pick a landmark and look back straight ahead and begin the turn. There's the landmark. Once again, go wings level and use our landmark as a course reference. We are now parallel to the runway. Checking our left low view, I could see that the runway slices our left wing strut right here. This is good. After making sure I am trimmed and stable at altitude, and we're on our course, it's time to do our before landing flow. I use the cockpit view and begin. Fuel selector both, mixtures rich. We move into the instrument view. Landing and taxi lights are on. Autopilot is off. We then look up again and check that we're still tracking towards our landmark. Also, looking out the left with the low view, we can see that the runway touchdown point is close on our left. It's almost time to begin the approach.
Let us now begin to explore the approach segments. These latter parts of the traffic pattern have the goal of reducing the airspeed and the altitude of the aircraft, so that it arrives on the final approach segment at 70 knots with flaps 30 and on the 3-degree glide path tracking towards the aiming point. To achieve this, it helps to follow a standard procedure with specific airspeed targets and flap settings on the different legs. Let us begin with the end of downwind procedures. Coming up abeam the touchdown point, we reduce our power to 2000 RPM and select flaps 10. This is the first notch of flaps. While doing this, we maintain our altitude, and this will allow us to reduce the airspeed to the target of 80 knots. We continue on level flight for the rest of the downwind leg. Once the touchdown point is approximately 45 degrees behind our left wing, it is time to turn base. Before entering the left turn, we reduce our power to 1700 RPM, and we'll allow our nose to drop slightly. We check our left and find our landmark and turn. As we turn base, the aircraft will have begun descending. Coming up on the base leg, perpendicular to the runway, we select flaps 20. We now have a target airspeed of 75 knots. And this will give us a steady descent with the RPM still at approximately 1700. On the latter part of the base leg, we can usually see the PAPI, or visually judge our glide path angle. If we are high or low, we can change the power and the pitch to correct. It is time to perform the base to final turn. The timing of this turn determines if you perform a perfect turn onto final, or if it becomes an overshoot, like this, or an undershoot, like this.
Just a few words on the risks associated with the base to final turn. So in real life, many accidents have unfortunately resulted from pilots attempting to narrow the turn radius in an overshoot situation. Usually, such situations develop like this. The pilot misjudges and begins to turn too late. As the runway appears in view, the pilot is startled and realizes that an overshoot will occur. The natural reaction for many pilots is then to increase the bank angle, in an effort to increase the rate of the turn. But increasing the bank angle has the risk of introducing a stall. As we increase the bank angle beyond 30 degrees, the vertical speed will increase considerably. The pilot will realize this and pull back on the yoke, resulting in a higher pitch angle, which could result in a stall. To make matters even worse, often the pilot finds that increasing the bank angle is insufficient to salvage the turn. It is then tempting to use the rudder to create a yaw, pushing the nose towards the runway. We should remember though that the secondary effect of the rudder is a roll tendency. When this uncommanded roll occurs, the pilot will naturally counter it with aileron input. In our example from a left-hand traffic pattern where they find themselves on an overshoot, the pilot would increase the bank angle and then use the left rudder to try to align with the runway. As they use left rudder, the right wing would tend to rise, and this would then be countered with a right aileron input. As we see here, the plane would be in a high bank, left rudder, and right aileron situation. This is a pretty dangerous state, as the high bank coupled with the cross control inputs, that is, rudder in one direction and aileron in the opposite direction, generates a lot of drag and a greatly increased stalling speed. The airplane is then much more likely to stall, and if this occurs in the traffic pattern, close to the ground, the stall could lead to deadly consequences. In the sim, just as in real life, avoid the temptation to increase the bank angle on your overshoots. Consider your 30-degree bank angle to be a hard limit, and always strive to fly coordinated by checking your slip indicator. If an overshoot occurs, just allow it to progress and continue past the center line. Once you've come around, gently steer back and regain your center line. For the next pattern though, consider why the overshoot happened. Perhaps your parallel distance was too narrow, shortening the base, or perhaps you didn't use a 30-degree bank angle in the turn to base and the turn to final. The timing of the base to final turn is something you'll learn to estimate visually as your experience builds. It won't be long until you realize that the overshoots are behind you.
Having completed a perfect turn onto final, it's time to prepare for landing. As we go wings level on the final leg, we extend flaps 30 and reduce the airspeed to our initial approach speed of 70 knots. It is now important to once again check where we are in relation to the 3-degree glide path. If we are high or low, we make early corrections to get us back onto the glide path, which allows for a much more stable final approach. Remember, if you feel unsafe or if you're too high or flying too fast, you can always go around. And the go-around procedure and the training of that was part of our previous lesson. So feel free to go back and check and rehearse that once again. Before Jason shows exactly how to fly the approach, let us rehearse the procedures. At beamed touchdown point, we reduce the RPM to 2000. We set flaps 10 and we maintain altitude. This gives us approximately 80 knots. At 45 degrees from our touchdown point, we reduce the RPM to 1700 and lower our nose slightly. We begin the turn. When we are wings level on the base, we select flaps 20 and aim for 75 knots. Once established on final with wings level, we select flaps 30 and aim for 70 knots. On short final, we finally reduce the speed to 61 knots.
Let me talk you through how to fly the approach in the plane. Here we are on downwind. We are just coming up on our beam point. I return our eyes forward and keep our eyes on our landmark, continuing parallel to the runway. We're going to reduce power to 2000 RPM. Check our airspeed to be below the VFE of 110 knots and immediately extend flaps to 10. Remember, as we select flaps, the nose is going to want to rise. We must maintain pitch to avoid climbing. The airspeed will begin to trickle back towards our target of 80 knots. I will have to use trim to become stable at the new power, airspeed, and flap setting. I keep flying towards my landmark. I check the runway over our left shoulder. We're approaching a 45-degree angle to touchdown point. It's time to begin the turn to base. We're going to check our left quickly for traffic and a landmark to turn toward. As Martin said here, we want to start descending before we turn. Thus, I first reduce RPM to about 1700 RPM and let the nose fall slightly. I then begin our turn. Again, remember to maintain pitch in the turn to keep the airspeed at around 80 knots. It's also important to turn with 30 degrees of bank, as less bank angle may seriously shorten the wings level time on base. We're coming up on the base leg landmark. Let's go wings level. We check our airspeed to be below VFE of 85 knots and select flaps 20. My airspeed target is now about 75 knots. As the runway appears in front of our left wing strut, it's about time to turn final. I begin our final turn with 30 degrees of bank, but I see that if I'm undershooting the turn as I'm prepared to reduce the bank angle, aiming to level out on the extended center line. There we are, looking good on the glide path. Let's extend flaps 30 and reduce our airspeed to 70 knots. Now it is as important as ever to use the trim. Here we are stable on final, and from here, the landing progresses just like we practiced in our previous lesson.
When you perform the session in the game, the goal is to perform several touch and go landings, practicing the pattern procedures as well as the landing and takeoff techniques on each lap. Therefore, it is important that you also become familiar with the touch and go procedure. A touch and go landing is one where after touchdown, the flaps are once again retracted and the engine power is increased back to full. The landing is therefore transformed into a takeoff without the need to stop and return back to the threshold for a new takeoff. The procedure is quite simple. Once you touch down and the nose wheel is in contact with the runway, retract the flaps fully. Make a quick visual check that the flaps are actually coming up. Adding full power, be prepared to counter with right rudder in order to maintain the center line. Once your jaw is stable, check your airspeed. It should now be close to 55 knots and it's time to rotate. The rest of the takeoff procedure works just like normal.
Learning how to take off and land and getting ready for your solo is one of the most demanding but also one of the most rewarding parts of learning how to fly, both in the simulator as well as in real life. Takeoff and landing exercises in the pattern involve practicing both the quite extensive traffic pattern procedures and learning how to maneuver the aircraft in takeoff and landing. As in real life, you'll find the exercises engaging, challenging, and quite intense. But practice makes perfect, and most students fly solo after just a few hours of receiving dual instruction in the traffic pattern. On our friend Chris's channel, Angle of Attack, you can join in on the action as his students take on the traffic pattern flying with takeoffs and landings. You'll see their journey, the highs, the frustration, and the excitement as they work towards their solo releases. Chris exhibits some of the best teaching techniques in aviation and shares our passion for creating fun and engaging aviation training content. Visit his channel if you're looking for inspiration in preparation for your solo flights.
And this is it, the final lesson before your solo flight. You have already mastered the art of maneuvering, of takeoffs and of landings, and now only the final challenge awaits. So there's no time to waste in getting up there, joining the traffic pattern. And you can do that right now inside Microsoft Flight Simulator. Access to our curated in-game lessons are available at the Academy website, where you will also find a comprehensive rehearsal material, as well as an easy way to load the training missions straight into the simulator. Also, please know that if you're enjoying our educational content and the virtual flying courses we provide, please also consider subscribing or leaving a comment here on our YouTube channel. That way, we will continue to be able to produce more and even better content in the future. See you out there.